Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming in a new multi-class video. The series in which we discuss both strong as hell builds and some much more unique and silly ones too. We have a bit more of a focus on that one this time, with some follow-ups from last video, a new multi-class build from us, and a really cool bleed focused multi-class that I'm going to open with. So speaking of which, let's get started. We begin with the bleed build. The bleed Barbarian concept is one I've actually been wondering about. There's this strange and pretty terrible permanent buff that you can get in Act 1 in the Underdark. I say terrible because it requires a sacrifice of one of the main companions. Boal here requests you sacrifice one of your permanent companions in exchange for his perma buff, Boal's Blessing. This passive provides advantage on attack rolls against bleeding creatures, and so creates the core of a potential bleed build, and it's something I've been thinking about since we originally talked about this concept. With that core passive explained, what would make the perfect use of bleeds? Well, that's where the Barbarian using the Wild Heart subclass featuring the Tiger Heart comes in. Tiger Heart Rage increases your jump distance, sure, but it also gives you the attack Tiger's Bloodlust, causing you to attack up to 3 enemies at once in a cleaving motion, making them bleed for 2 turns in exchange for just an action. It's a perfect source of bleed because you can apply it to groups of enemies and you can use it multiple times a turn if you need to, leading to potentially very high DPS AoE situations. It's very reliable. Then at level 6 in the subclass, you're going to unlock the aspect of the beast Tiger, where you can add your strength modifier twice to attack rolls against bleeding enemies, as well as the extra bonus of proficiency in survival. Combine that then with the Boal Benediction buff, and you've got advantage on those targets that you're absolutely smashing as you spread bleed constantly. In the later game, as the build continues to push its potential, at level 10, you'd get a second animal aspect. In that case, we'd go for Wolverine, making your attacks on bleeding targets now maiming attacks, and if maimed, they can't move, and they have disadvantage on dex saves for 1 turn. Suddenly our AoE cleave from Tiger's Bloodlust is now rooting the targets. So we could start running around, smacking everyone, preventing any movement at any point. So, you know, the mobile feat would be great for this, avoiding any attack of opportunity while you run around hitting people. There's also that one item, the Spiked Bulb. You could throw those for small AoE that causes bleed, and that could be huge for this concept too, as AoE roots. But what about the multi-class? Well, the last 2 levels would be very suited to Fighter, bringing in the multi-class concept. Fighter would net you a fighting style, so great weapon fighting style, and action surge as well. A nice 10 and 2 mix for Barbarian and Fighter, all centered around spreading tons of bleeds. So it's nice to finally get into this concept. I've been thinking about what would work for that buff since we first looked at it in the Things series. Second up for this video though, comes from the comments of a recent multi-class video. It's a username I'm going to struggle to pronounce. I'm going to call you Mr. BRKO, who talked about their very unique and fun challenge build, following up on my talk about more unique multi-class ideas compared to just straight meta picks. BRKO explained that they're making use of a mix of Bard and Wizard, tied to the idea of having high expertise in medicine. By using a halfling as their race too, they're able to re-roll any natural 1 rolls they get when trying to double craft alchemy potions. Why go so hard to make your alchemy better? Well, it's because his entire concept here is about crafting a huge amount of throwables, coatings, elixirs, and more as the main combat aspect for the playstyle. The build allows for next to no failure when it comes to the medicine check, resulting in double the amount of potions and poisons and elixirs that you're making each time. So if you need fire to throw, you need potent heals, always having bonus damage on your attacks, not to mention the crazy potential of certain elixirs, like the Elixir of Bloodlust. That one provides plus 5 temporary hit points, and more importantly, an extra action after killing an enemy, which is insane, probably one of the best in the game. When it comes to the multi-class layout, BRKO explained briefly that they're running 10 levels into Bard under the College of Swords subclass, and then the remaining 2 levels go into Transmutation Wizard, with the expertise choice going into Medicine, as I said. It wasn't exactly a detailed explanation, but it's no secret as to why Swords Bard is good, providing you with flourish attacks, which are all incredible. The various passives of the Bard, like 3 short rests for the party, and things like Bardic Inspirations for the team as a party buffer, as well as its spell slots, extra attack, and more. I'd imagine the main stat for the build would still be Charisma then, since the Wizard will still try to provide some extra spell slots and technically the potential to learn scroll spells as its basis, but I don't think you'd be relying on Int as a damage modifier. Personally, I really like the concept. It fulfills that request I had about give me more niche and interesting builds that make the experience very different to normal, especially in that late game when things shift as you get the insane gear. So very big props for this one, and yet another reminder to me that I need to stop ignoring alchemy. alchemy. Next, we have a very cool take on what is a Battlemage. This one comes from Cotton, who covered this concept in a dedicated video recently, so I'll give this a light overview. This Battlemage then is a mix of fighter and wizard, as you might imagine, that gets right up in the action while spreading absolute chaos through massive terrain covering lightning, and using synergized attacks and spells to continually trigger the water and keep spreading it to keep it all electrified. Extremely effective in tighter landscapes, or ideally corridors where the enemy are forced to engage with that location. Surprisingly, the build also ties in dual wielding specific weapons that are great for this concept. There's the Trident of the Waves that helps you create water surfaces constantly in a fight, and Wave Mother's Sickle providing advantage against those wet creatures. So very good synergy there, as you can see. For levels though, the build ends at level 7 in fighter and 5 in wizard, or 6 in both. Either way, starting as a fighter, you'll pick your fighting style for the 2-weapon fighting, so you can have the offhand be much more relevant. The fighter will push on to the subclass of Eldritch Knight, providing some spell slots to pair with the ones you'll also get from the wizard. The Eldritch Knight also provides vital cantrips for this concept in Ray of Frost and Shocking Grasp. If you go for the level 7 Eldritch Knight, that's going to be all more important, as we mentioned in a sec. At level 4 fighter, you'll pick up the logical dual wielder feat to allow for heavier weapon dual wielding, and also +1 AC when you are doing that. You'll then push the fighter to level 6 for the second feat, and then finally 7, which will provide you that other main passive from the Eldritch Knight, War Magic, which means those cantrips I mentioned earlier allow for a follow-up weapon attack after you use one of them as a bonus action. If you didn't go for that, you could go for 6 and 6 in Fighter and Wizard, and that would get you an extra level 4 spell slot, which is nice, but I prefer the higher Eldritch Knight. After this choice though, we push Wizard to whatever the highest level it'll end up going, with a choice of Divination or Conjuration as those subclasses. How hard do you want to go with spreading the lightning zone, or control the roles of fights for you or the enemies? From the level 5 wizard though, we get both haste and lightning bolt, the major power spike for the build in its completion. Haste for obvious reasons, which is why you'd pick up the Warcaster feat at level 4 wizard to help maintain the concentration, and then lightning bolt is a massive burst of lightning which will continuously trigger the water pools into lightning pools at the same time. So the build just maintains its mage armor, buffs itself or others with haste, spreads these massive pools of water and pops them constantly with bursts of lightning, and you're either smashing with your double melee attacks, spreading more pools of water, or popping that water with potent lightning spells, or just controlling the fight. But yeah, that's just a light overview of the main details. Cotton again has a full video on this build on the channel right now, with all the extra info like ideal gear, and exactly what spells to use and how to play it. So go check that out if you're interested. Moving on, it's time for a fun thing I was hoping for after the last episode. Last time I asked about theme builds after I covered the whole Witcher theme concept. Pick a character and try to fulfill that character in Baldurs Gate 3 as best you can. Well, this one comes from 2 people, brought up by Oh My God It's Hobo. Hobo mentioned how they'd bring in their own One Piece style crew to Baldurs Gate 3, mentioning the 4 of Luffy, Nami, Zoro, and Chopper. Luffy in this case would be a monk and rogue, Zoro a fighter barbarian, Nami a wizard or sorcerer, and Chopper could be a bard combined with a druid. But it was actually the reply comment from Illusion Studios that I think really hit the mark on this concept. He came up with a bunch of ideas for the Straw Hat crew with great concepts too. So let's go through them. Starting with Luffy, naturally an open hand monk. Zoro would have to be a dual wielding fighter, which I agree with. I guess you could use a third weapon and like throw that or something of that nature. Nami would super logically be a storm sorcerer. After all, she's all about controlling the weather. Sanji, as Illusion suggests, would also be an open hand monk like Luffy, which is a shame but probably accurate because there's not really like a kick based concept that you can do in this game, is there? Usopp would naturally be a ranger under the hunter subclass. Brook fits perfectly as a College of Swords bard. It's like that was made for him. Jinbei would also clearly be a monk, but Illusion suggested that the subclass for him would instead be Way of the Four Elements, and I really like that. Chopper could instead be a cleric combined with a druid, which I think is more accurate. Druid obviously with the way he's shapeshifting, but as a healer he needs a healing focused class as that multiclass. Robin would be a mix of rogue and some kind of caster. After all, there is that subclass for rogue, arcane trickster, and you'd want to work in something like flight and obviously mage hand as a vital concept for her. Lastly, Illusion mentioned Frankie, who would need to use mods to work in that D&D class, the Artificer. So while this one wasn't exactly a specific build overview, and not all of them were even multi-classes, I really like this follow-up to that theme build request I made last time. I'd love to hear more of this nature in the future to talk about in this series. Just the idea of this one could give many people fun playthrough challenges, like picking one of these characters and trying to make that theme work. But now, last for the video, I wanted to flesh out the whole challenge concept. The idea of self-imposed challenge builds or runs in general. Fun builds that aren't meta strong like the duo hand crossbow bards or tavern brawler monks and so on. I think a lot of people agree at this point that the game definitely becomes quite straightforward in Act 3 once you hit the ridiculous items that exist to rework entire builds. I find it lame to have to tell people to redo their build once they hit Act 3 every time because of those gloves and amulet that set your main stats to 23. But I also don't like the idea of ignoring them or making your build worse intentionally. Recently I saw a Reddit thread about exactly this, and a comment from the user Holiday Driver provided a great solution and various ideas for this. They suggested instead of going anti-optimization and numbing what is a fun aspect of this game, instead challenge yourself to any of these different restrictions while yet on Tactician. There's the full solo run, so no companions or help of any kind. These have been a very popular challenge. An alternative to that that's not quite as hard would be the duo or romance run. Like you pick one of the companions you really like and find a way to complete the game as a duo compared to solo. Then there's things like the no consumables run or the no illithid powers run. They're both very important. Or ones tied to specific equipment. You only allow yourself to use like a certain category of gear. Blues or lower, greens and commons only. You could scale it up. So in Act 1 you allow yourself only common items. Act 2 only uncommon. And Act 3 only rares as another idea. So I like these types of challenges because it allows you to go as hard as you can and make your build as strong as possible, but within your own restrictions. What other challenges would you consider along this line? Let us know and maybe you'll give someone a fun idea for a playthrough. But yeah, I'll leave it there. A bit of a different multi-class video today, not all about meta, but focused on ideas with unique playstyles. Next time I'll be back to make sure I put in some strong concepts though, but this one was a nice change of pace for the series. If you guys have any multi-class ideas, strong, unique, or just silly, maybe a follow-up to today's topics, let us know. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.